Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Teniola Shubowali. A preliminary report into the crash of an Ethiopian Airlines plane last month says the aircraft nosedived several times before it crashed. Ethiopia's transport minister says pilots repeatedly followed procedures recommended by Boeing before the crash. Sadly, the pilots were not able to control the aircraft despite their efforts. Flight ET-302 crashed after takeoff from Addis Ababa, killing all 157 people on board. It was the second crash of a Boeing 737 MAX aircraft in 5 months.
In line with international rules on air accidents, the March 10 Ethiopian Airlines crash preliminary report did not attribute blame, nor did it give a detailed analysis of the flight, which is expected to take several months before a final report due within a year. But in a clear indication of where Ethiopian investigators are focusing most of their attention, the report cleared the pilots of using incorrect procedures and issued 2 recommendations directed at plane maker Boeing and its regulators.
The crew performed all the procedures repeatedly provided by the manufacturer, but was not able to control the aircraft.
Ethiopian Transport Minister Dagmawit Mogzis says the report recommends Boeing review the aircraft control system, and aviation authorities confirmed the problem had been solved before allowing the model of plane back into the air. The March 10 disaster prompted a worldwide grounding of Boeing's best-selling plane and scrutiny of its certification process.
Since repetitive uncommanded aircraft nose-down conditions are noticed in this preliminary investigation, it is recommended that the aircraft flight control system related to the flight controllability shall be reviewed by the manufacturer.
On Tuesday, the CEO of Ethiopian Airlines said there were clear similarities between the March 10 crash and the Indonesian Lion Air crash of 2017.
Very clear similarity with the Lion Air accident, because number one, it's the same airplane model, brand new airplane. In our case, less than 5 months in service.
Both preliminary crash reports suggest a new design to the 737 MAX 8 malfunctioned, pushing each plane repeatedly into a nosedive. The 737 MAX is Boeing's top-selling jet, with almost 5,000 on order. Ethiopian Airlines is also in the midst of an expansion drive, while other 737 MAX customers and victims' families want answers and potentially compensation.
Meanwhile, lawyers representing the families of the victims killed in Indonesia's Lion Air crash are planning to bring charges against Boeing along with the recent Ethiopian air crash, as both incidents showed similarities. Lawyer Mark Lindquist says the legal team is trying to have the Lion Air case heard in the United States. The legal team says it has also received requests to represent families of the victims of the March 10 Ethiopian Airlines crash. The preliminary report into the Lion Air disaster said the pilots lost control after struggling with the plane's maneuvering characteristics augmentation system software, a new automated anti-stall feature that repeatedly lowered the nose of the aircraft before based on faulty data from a sensor.
There are many similarities between the Lion Air crash and the Ethiopian Air crash. Similar planes, the Boeing 737 MAX, problems with the sensor and the MCAS, similar flight patterns where the nose is going down and then up and down and then up as the pilots fought the MCAS, and finally, similar steep dive that was fatal. So that's the big difference. Lion Air pilots could not have known about the MCAS, and Ethiopian Air pilots should have known about the MCAS.
Joining us now is an aviation lawyer, Dali Ajibola, to discuss more on this. Thank you for joining us on Network Africa. So how do you think the families of the victims feel now that the report says it is a technical issue and not the fault of the crew?
Thank you very much for having me. Well, the families of the victims would clearly still be very, bereaved, very much bereaved. They would feel low and, down as to the loss incurred of their loved ones. The development that has just arisen, where they've discovered that there's a possibility that it was due to technical issues with the aircraft, may not, from the point of view of the families of the loved ones, do much. But what it will do is take away perhaps a perception of blame on the airline itself, on Ethiopian Airlines.
Yeah, well, lawyers of the victims are asking for a merger in investigation. Do you think there would be an accurate result?
Yes, I believe there would be. Eventually, when the final report is published, there will definitely be accurate reporting on what actually happened. Mm. The flight recording system was retrieved, and also the black box was retrieved. And with this equipment, the investigators are able to have a clear idea of what happened in the last minutes before the crash. Mm. Well, it's also important that, sorry, let me just add this, it's also important that, unlike in previous times, the investigation report will also include contribution from non-Boeing officials, which is quite important.
Okay, well, what are your thoughts about the whole report released today in general, and what can families do with this report?
Well, it's a preliminary report. It gives an indication as to the initial findings of what happened in the last minutes of the experience of the crash, but it's not conclusive. And at the moment, not too much can be done with it in terms of proof of what actually did happen. But it does give an indication as to the likely outcome, or pointers towards the likely outcome, and also assists in directing investigation and elimination of issues that perhaps were raised that are not relevant for the investigation, for the final determination of what actually happened.
All right, Dolly, this report now recommends that Boeing review the aircraft's control system, and aviation authorities confirm the problem as it has similarities with the Lion Air crash too. Will this help lift the ban on their planes?
I don't think it will. I think, if anything, it confirms perhaps the initial doubts that were held as to the flight systems of that particular aircraft. So I don't see how it would help lift the ban. And the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration itself is conducting an investigation. And I would imagine that in order to avert further, perhaps, mishaps,